don't know about anybody else. I've got a case of raccoon eyes today. Anybody else in the room? But I'm good. I feel good. It's been a beautiful weekend. Kelly and I had the privilege of driving down through Virginia yesterday, and it's just, well, I say the mountains. They're really big hills. If you've seen if you've seen the Rocky Mountains, the East Coast mountains are like big hills, but it was beautiful. It wasn't as hazy as it can be sometimes. A little bit lower humidity in that. So this morning we are finishing up our summer in Proverbs. We have walked through some of the Proverbs, and this morning we're going to be in Proverbs chapter 22. If you want to find that in your copy of God's Word, that would be fantastic, and we'll get there in a few minutes. So before we get started, just to have a little bit of interaction back and forth. So a few weeks ago, I was part of Jam Camp, and obviously that's just a big room full of kids jumping around, chaos. It's more like structured, organized chaos. And so I had the privilege of helping out with the basketball portion so we had about between 60 and 70 kids in a gym. Now, if you know anything about basketball, that's a lot of kids together in one space, especially younger kids, older kids. And so talk about organized chaos. And it's amazing to me that nobody got hurt. It's just amazing. But working with networks, basketball, player development stuff over the years, one of the boundary creating phrases that we learned was stop, look, and listen. So you need to get everybody's attention. It's just stop, and then you teach you help the kids learn to say when you say stop, you say look. They say look and listen. So if I say stop, you say look and listen. All right, let's try it again. Stop. Look and listen. All right, that was pretty good, actually. I'm glad. I think everybody's kind of tracking. Let's try it one more time. Stop. Look and listen. So I may throw that randomly into our time together today, and so we'll see just to get everybody back on focus. And wasn't going to do that, but I thought it'd add a little bit of fun and adventure in our time together today. So we're talking about the topic. What are the benefits of boundaries in life? What are the benefits of boundaries in life? So we're going to define that a little bit. But let me ask another question before we really dive into this topic and into Proverbs chapter 22. How many of us like to be told what to do or what not to do? So, yeah, we got a few rule followers maybe in the room. But I think that often stirs up in us a rebellious response. And sometimes it's visible and verbal. Sometimes it's internal. So like for me, for example, I'm more of an introvert. So I can be pretty good at being passive aggressive. And so I may not show it on the outside. I may not even verbally respond to something that's going on, but I can be passive aggressive if I feel like my boundaries are being violated. But how does that get responded to sometimes? Obviously the quick short one is no. Any parents ever heard that in the room? No. Or mind your own business. Or you can't tell me what to do. Right? Or it could be internal, but nobody is going to tell me what I can and can't do. And sometimes we just have that kind of response on the inside, especially when we feel like somebody is telling us what to do or what not to do. So I was looking for an old video. It seems like I saw this video. It was years ago. I didn't find it, but about a kid and a mom in a bank. And I remember that her telling the kid, "Don't go over there." And you see the mom turning away to do something with the teller, and the kid keeps inching over to the area where the kid was told not to go, and then he looks back at the mom, and the mom's busy, and finally goes into the area where the kid was told not to go. I did find a Facebook video by These Parents Are Superheroes. Anybody familiar with that in the room? And so this video, it was a little, you see the little kid, it's a 3-minute video. And I think it's 5 years old. And the little kid is basically talking to his mom and trying to rationalize and explain away and change the subject in anything that the kid can do to avoid. You don't really find out what the problem was until a minute into the video. And I thought it was about something totally different because the kid was talking about another kid and I think toys or something, I don't know, and trying to rationalize. And the mom would say, listen to me. And the kid would say, no, listen to me. And this went on for 3 minutes. Part of it was hard for me because I am not about child-centered parenting. So I felt like the conversation went way too long personally. But I get it. But didn't find out till a minute in, it had something to do with cupcakes, right? And the kid had gotten into the cupcakes, I'm assuming, and the kid was trying to explain away, rationalize, whatever. We're all good at that, right? We can all be good at explaining away and rationalizing boundary breaking. But it's a good illustration of boundaries and the lack of following boundaries. So let's define what a boundary is real quick before we jump into this. So what is a boundary? In the tangible world, the best example is a property line. Right? That's a boundary, and it's in this proverb. It's referenced in this proverb. They define ownership, control, and responsibility. So whatever that property line is defines, if you own a piece of property, it defines who owns it, who controls it, and who's responsible for what happens inside of that boundary line. In the relational world, it's a little more fuzzy. The boundaries are less tangible, but there are truths or principles that help us relate to God and one another in healthy ways. That's what boundaries really are. Truths and principles that help us to relate to God and one another in healthy ways. When you boil it all down, Dr. Henry Cloud says boundaries help keep the good stuff in and the bad stuff out. Boundaries help keep the good stuff in and the bad stuff out. We tend to like them when we want them or when we set them, not so much sometimes when others do. So let's talk about why boundaries are good. Because boundaries help us live in the reality of Proverbs chapter 22, verse 1. So I believe that's up on the screen. So let's read that together, if you would. Proverbs chapter 22, verse 1. A good name is to be chosen rather than riches, great riches, and favor is better than silver or gold. A good name is to be chosen or more desired over great riches or great wealth. Favor with God and with man or mankind is to be esteemed, is to be valued. Better than silver or gold. The Message says it like this: a sterling reputation is better than striking it rich. A gracious spirit is better than money in the bank. The Amplified Version says a good name earned by honorable behavior, godly wisdom, more courage, and personal integrity is more desirable than great riches. And favor is better than silver and gold. Stop. Let's try it one more time. Stop. All right. Matthew Henry, in his commentary, says this about this verse. We should be more careful to do that by which we may get and keep a good name than that by which we may raise and increase a great estate. To be well beloved, to have an interest in the esteem and affection of all about us. That's really the phrase that caught my eye. To be well beloved, to have an interest in the esteem and affection of all about us. This is better than silver and gold. David Guzik says, the wealth of respect and recognized excellence in character, a good name, is valuable beyond great riches. In the end, my reputation in heaven is more important than my reputation on the earth. Would be another way to look at it for those of us who are God's people. My reputation in heaven is more important than my reputation on this earth. So let's dig into verses 22 through 29 for a few minutes. Again, if you'd follow along there, I'm going to read through Proverbs chapter 22, verses 22 through 29, and then we're going to talk about boundaries in relationship to these verses for a few minutes this morning. Verse 22, do not rob the poor because he's poor, or crush the afflicted at the gate. For the Lord will plead their cause and rob of life those who rob them. Make no friendship with a man given to anger, nor go with a wrathful man, lest you learn his ways, and entangle yourself in a snare. Be not one of those who give pledges, who put up security for debts. If you have nothing with which to pay, why should your bed be taken from under you? Do not move the ancient landmark that your fathers have set. Do you see a man skillful in his work? He will stand before kings. He will not stand before obscure men. So this is the English Standard Version, which uses the phrase "do not" in verse 22. In the New American Standard Version, it uses that phrase "do not" 24 times in chapters 22 through 24. It's a boundary, right? Do not. Do this. It's a boundary that's being established. And it's also, if you want another prominent use of that phrase, do not, in Proverbs, it's Proverbs chapter 3. It's used 11 times in Proverbs chapter 3. Do not, which is interesting. The verses probably most of us are familiar with or have heard or remember from Proverbs chapter 3 is what? Verse 5 and 6, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make your paths straight. But do not. It's used 4 times in these verses. And the passage is really the beginning of a series of 30 wise sayings or words of the wise in chapters 22 through 24. Look back at verses 17 through 21. It really introduces this whole section of wise sayings. Verse 17, incline your ear and hear the words of the wise and apply your heart to my knowledge. And then down in verses 20 and 21, haven't I written for you 30 sayings of counsel and knowledge, to make you know what is right and true, that you may give a true answer to those who sent you. Interesting, that's a question, right? Have I not written for you 30 sayings of counsel and knowledge? It's being asked in a question form. So as we look at this situation, let's talk about what the benefits or boundaries are in life more specifically, and we'll reference back to verses 22 through 29. Number one, they serve as a warning. Boundaries serve as a warning. There can be consequences to our actions or inactions, yes? Sometimes severe consequences to our actions or inactions. Boundaries simply serve as a warning. Warning, don't step over that boundary. danger on the other side. And in this case, if you look at verses 22 and 23, first reference, God has chosen a side in regard to this treating of the poor. Matthew Henry says, "He that robs the poor will be found in the end a murderer of himself." What does it say? The Lord will plead their cause and rob of life those who rob them. God has definitively taken a side in relationship to this. The second one in verses 24 and 25. Matthew Henry goes on to say, "Our corrupt hearts have so much tinder or kindling in them that it's dangerous conversing with those who throw about the sparks of their passion." Charles Bridges goes on to say, "Being friends with a hot-tempered man is like living in a house that's on fire." In other words, there is no way not to get burned. That's what's going to happen. It's why fathers are exhorted not to exasperate or irritate their children. Why do parents teach their kids to stop and look both ways before they cross the street or the road? Because there can be severe consequences if they don't. Same thing with teaching them not to touch a hot stove or not to mess with electrical outlets. Right? There can be severe consequences. Boundaries serve as a warning. In relationship to verses 26 and 27, we must not associate ourselves nor contract an intimacy with men of broken fortunes and reputations, who need and will urge their friends to be bound for them. In other words, don't enslave yourself to a lender on behalf of another. Failure to pay debts in the Bible could lead to property seizure or forced servitude. There are consequences to stepping over the boundary. And then the last one in verse 28. In Joshua chapters 13 through 21, the promised land was divided and boundaries marked out for each tribe. Already warned not to cheat. They had already been warned not to cheat their neighbors by moving or removing landmarks, property boundaries. Deuteronomy 19:14, if you want to jot down, and Deuteronomy 27:17 says, "Cursed be anyone who moves his neighbor's landmark." And all the people shall say, "Amen." In other words, so be it. We agree with that. We should not move each other's property boundaries. We should not take what belongs to someone else or try to deceive people in those situations. Boundaries serve as a warning. Number two, they help define what not to do or where not to go. They help define what not to do or where not to go. Related to the first ones again in verses 22 and 23, we should not squeeze those with our power whom we should water with our bounty, is really the essence of Matthew Henry said. We shouldn't be wondering how we can take advantage of other people or situations, especially the weaker among us. Related to not having friendship with a man given to anger, his habits will influence yours, and as you become more of an angry person, you will set a snare for your soul. We will set a snare for our soul through bitterness, anger, and resentment. We end up enslaving ourselves and being consumed by it. I was at a celebration, Kelly and I were at a celebration of life yesterday, really two of them. One, a dear lady who passed away a couple weeks ago, and Jan Thayer, who lived a faithful life, loved God, loved Jesus, and lived that out in her day-to-day life. And an 80th birthday party celebration. But one of the things that Pastor Peyton said was, guilty grief and angry grief will never heal. And he was specifically speaking to the family, trying to encourage them not to extend fault or blame in those situations, because guilty grief or angry grief will never heal. And it's really that point of bitterness, anger, and resentment don't lead anywhere good. We become consumed by those things. So we need to ask for God's grace and God's help to release that bitterness, that anger, that resentment over whatever it is that may have offended us or were offended by. No matter who did it or how it happened. That's a path to healing. And the next one, we are taught here not to invade another man's right. Basically, this is committed robbery and fraud if we move another's boundary. The boundaries were sacred because God owned the land and had given it to the fathers as their inheritance. To extend one's land at another's expense was a major violation of covenant and oath. Was a major violation of covenant and oath. So number one, boundaries serve as a warning. Number two, they help define what not to do or where not to go. And number three, they help define what you can do and where you can go. We all like that part, right? We all like that part. Stop.
Look and listen.
All right. Not bad. Not bad. Throw it in. Let's do it one more time. Stop.
Look and listen.
All right. They define what you can do and where you can go. So the first one, don't rob the poor because he's poor, or crush the afflicted at the gate. Really, what are we talking about here? Be compassionate and gracious. Treat others like you want to be treated, right? The golden rule. The poor deserve protection and compassion because they may lack the financial resources to protect their legal rights. And that can be a tempting target for some. And I was thinking about this. How we treat the weaker among us in many ways reveals the conditions of our hearts. The way we treat the weaker among us in many ways reveals the condition of our hearts. They help define what you can do and where you can go in relationship to angry. The Bible tells us be angry, but don't sin. So there is a right place, a right time to be angry if there's actual wrongs that we should be standing against. But at the same time, we need to learn to bridle our anger in a healthy way. So what is it? You might say the opposite is what? Be calm, be at peace. Be calm, be at peace. Proverbs 15:18 says, a hot-tempered man stirs up strife, but the slow to anger calms a dispute. The slow to anger calms a dispute. And then Psalm 46:10, the first part of Psalm 46:10 simply says what? Be still, basically be calm, and know that I am God. A lot of times the reason we get angry, we get upset, we get frustrated, we get resentful is because we forget to bring God's sovereignty and providence into the equation, right? We forget that He's at work in our lives and in these circumstances that we're facing. We may not see it or understand it, what He's doing or why He's allowing what He's allowing at the time. But if we can focus on being still and remembering that He's God, that will bring a calmness into our situation. In relationship to verses 26 and 27, but not one of those who give pledges, who put up security for debts. Be not one of those who give pledges, who put up security for debts. Commit to pay for what you can pay for. Be generous would be another way to say it. This is certainly not saying don't be generous. It's actually saying be generous, I think, in the end. Be responsible to provide for those under your care and then give what and how you can. And the last one, do not move the ancient landmark that your fathers have set. Be grateful for what God has provided for you and yours. But here's the big question related to this one. Stop. Stop. Can we celebrate the successes and blessings of others? Can we celebrate the blessings and successes of others? That's really the test for what you can do and where you can go. And how we practice not moving others' landmarks. So, we talked about boundaries. They serve as a warning. They show us what not to do, where not to go. They help define where we can go and what we can do. And then there's verse 29. When I first started looking at this and thinking through it, I was like, I'm not sure how this connects or relates to all this other stuff. So before we go to a little bit of application, let's ask another question. What is the point of verse 29 as a bookend to these verses? So we had the bookend, right, of verse 1. A good name is to be desired above great riches. And then this one. Do you see a man skillful in his work? He'll stand before kings. He won't stand before obscure men. Somebody who's excellent in their craft or in whatever their job, whatever God has given them to do. What's the point in relationship to boundaries? Well, first aspect is these are all things that can keep you from experiencing verse 29. These 4 boundaries that we have here in these verses can all keep you from being able to live out verse 29. What do I mean? If you're focusing on what others have and don't have, you're going to have a hard time living out verse 29. If you're focused on being hot-tempered, it's going to always disturb your ability to focus on being good at anything but your anger and your bitterness and your resentment. You're not going to be able to be excellent at things. Debt makes work feel more like a chore, doesn't it? In other words, if you're so in debt, if you're so indebted, weighted down by debt, work is going to feel like more and more of a chore because you're always trying to overcome all that debt. And you feel like you can never get ahead. And the last one, instead of being grateful for what God has given you and maximizing the talents and abilities He's provided you, you try to take what others have. And I think the second aspect of verse 29 is wisdom pushes us toward excellence. Wisdom, wise sayings, boundaries help push us toward excellence. Colossians 3:23 and 24. David Guzik says this, the excellence of a man or woman's work can give them great standing in the world. More important, it gives them standing before the King of Kings. Stop.
Look and listen.
Stop.
Look and listen.
There was something I missed. I don't see it. So let's talk about application for a minute. So application for the message today, why are boundaries beneficial in life? Let me ask you to, with God's help, ask and answer this question. Which boundary we've discussed today, or one that God has brought to mind, maybe God brought a different boundary to mind for you this morning, do you chafe at the most? Which boundary, when you read that, when you hear that, when you're interacting with other people, bothers you the most? Spend some time journaling and praying over where that attitude is coming from. Why do you feel that way about it? What is it that's causing you to be bothered by that boundary? Ask God to help you identify the cause. Confess it to Him. And then repent of it. Which leads to the second question. Where could you and I be more proactive in relationship to these boundaries? Maybe it's finding a way to be more proactive toward the weaker among us. If that's the boundary you struggle with the most, go do something to minister to the weaker among us and bless them. Maybe you need to find a way to be the calming influence in a situation that you're facing or you know someone else is facing. Or maybe you just need to practice being still and knowing that He's God yourself in a situation that you're facing, because right now you want to respond with anger. Be still and know that He's God. Maybe for you, it's you need to find a way to be generous. You need to find a way to go be generous to someone or something. Or maybe for you, it's finding a way to celebrate the successes or blessings of others in a tangible way. Maybe you need to write a note of encouragement to someone who's been blessed or experienced a success in life that you don't feel super great about for whatever reason. Those are all ways. Pick one and act on it. Parents, maybe it's taking the time to spend some time with your children this week and help them understand this concept of boundaries better. And working with them to apply these things in one of these ways. Maybe you could use stop.
Look and listen.
Stop.
Look and listen.
Maybe you want to implement that in your home, because it sets a boundary, but then it also displays that there's a purpose for it. It's not just stop,
Look and listen.
right? Don't do that. It's no, there's a purpose in this. There's more to it than just what you don't do. It's how we need to be. So as we close and the band comes up to, let me ask you to pray with me. Father, we thank you for the boundaries that you set for us. We thank you that